Welcome to another episode of the pod, and it feels like it's been a while since we actually done one. Nate and I are back in school, so we're finding less time to do the pod, but hopefully we can get these out to you weekly. So we got a lot to talk about this week in terms of a lot of NBA story headlines emerging again, and also we finally have our Super Bowl preview for next weekend. So let's start there. So Nate, we're looking forward to the Chiefs and Bucks here. So give me a key matchup or like an X factor, or like what are your predictions for this game?
To get into this game, I have to say I was wrong about the Bucks in some ways. Although, I'm not gonna break the trend. I'm still gonna bet against them this week regardless. But I was wrong about this team. Their defense has been up to the task for the most part. I mean, their secondary, they played really well against Aaron Rodgers and a tough Green Bay offense. And looking to this game, though, I don't see that continuing just out of the fact that the Chiefs have so many weapons and they have those little split plays with Kelsey getting the ball at the line of scrimmage, and they have these plays where Tyreek Hill is running these slants, and it's so tough for a team to defend. So for that reason, I would go with the Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes continues to be the best quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. And this Chiefs team has such a high octane offense that I think you look at the Buccaneers with Tom Brady, and their offense has played well, but Tom Brady had 3 picks last week, and he continues to look vulnerable at times throughout the game, although he has led his team to victory throughout the postseason this far. But I'm definitely going to take the Chiefs in this one. I'm going to take them 34-20 against the Bucks, with the key matchup in this game being the Chiefs secondary versus Brady. You look at this Chiefs secondary, I mean, they have Tyrann Mathieu, who's been really good all year, and their corners have stepped up. This is not a great Chiefs defense, but it is a clutch one. And then for an X factor in this game, I said the Bucks defensive line. This defensive line for the Bucks, I mean, they have Sue, they have Jason Pierre-Paul, they have Shaquille Barrett. They can get at the quarterback effectively, and they'll have to. Kansas City's line is a little beat up coming into this one. I don't think it will matter too much, but if the Bucks have any chance, they'll have to take advantage at the line in this one.
Yeah, I think a huge X factor is the Bucks D line, and the guys he's listed there. They're pretty good players, and so I think that's probably the only thing that will might affect the Chiefs in a bad way. So in terms of Tom Brady's legacy and Patrick Mahomes' legacy, there's just been a lot of headlines surrounding, if Patrick Mahomes wins or loses this game, what does this do to his GOAT status in trying to chase Tom Brady for greatest of all time? So what are your thoughts on the implications of this game and Mahomes and Brady's reputation?
Well, if you look at the NBA right now, people kind of thought LeBron may have been done winning chips after his first year with the Lakers and they didn't make the playoffs, and now he's chasing number 6, but no one's really ever going to hold him to the level of Michael Jordan until he gets 6, in my opinion, just because that number has been so ingrained in NBA fans for so long. And it'll be the same with the NFL. I mean, if Brady wins this one, he'll be at 7 and Mahomes will be at 1. So he'll have to get 6 more throughout his career, which will be a really tough task. And in an NFL where it's more unpredictable of who gets to the Super Bowl and who has postseason success. And so if Patrick Mahomes pulls this one out, he needs 4 more. He'd have a win over Brady in the Super Bowl, and his only playoff loss to Brady would be because of a coin flip in the AFC Championship 2 years ago in his rookie season. So I do think that Patrick Mahomes is the most talented quarterback in NFL history already. So winning this one would mean a lot for him going forward. Not as much pressure on him to win every year since he'll only need 4. And I do see this as being like, if Tom Brady won this game, he'll always point back to that when they ask questions in the future.
I agree with that last point where if Tom Brady wins this game, everyone's going to be looking back at Mahomes' career and be like, hey, remember that one Super Bowl where you lost to Brady? That might taint your profile and being the greatest of all time. But yeah, I agree with you, and I've counted out the Bucks just like you twice already in my predictions in the NFL, and still Tom Brady is still here. So what do I do now? But I think I'm going to go with the Chiefs again. I think it's going to be a very interesting Super Bowl to watch. It's going to be fun to watch. A lot of high offense, and it'll just be really fun just watching the Bucks one more time with just all of the wide receivers. Just like they're literally all the players in their prime back in like 2016, 2017, like Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, like all those guys. And now it's like all the guys are brought back together. Let's make one more run at it, and let's just see how many fireworks are going to be created this next week. So
yeah, it's definitely like a boom or bust season for the Bucks, because I don't think they come back with this same roster next year. If they win this year, I don't really expect Gronkowski to play again or Brown to stay there. So yeah, I think it will be a defining moment for Brady and his legacy to point to those late championships as why he was better and why he had more longevity than Mahomes when it's all said and done. So moving on from this to get to some NBA topics. The Utah Jazz are on a 10-game win streak with a massive win against the Mavericks without Donovan Mitchell in their last game. And I just want to ask you, Jacob, what's the case for this team to be legit this year when they haven't been legit for the past few years?
Yeah, just to start off, I think if you are a person who thinks the Jazz are not legit yet, like you are totally wrong. It is no question the Utah Jazz are legit this year, and they are heavy contenders in the Western Conference. And it's just such an amazing story, like dating back to last year. Like this team almost fell apart when there's this tension between Mitchell and Gobert. And if it wasn't for the bubble, I just heard people saying like, oh, the bubble brought them together, just all this time spending time together down in Florida. If they didn't have that in more of a traditional season, then who knows what would have happened between the two of them. What if Gobert didn't want to stay with the Jazz? Like he just signed a massive contract, and so just even dating back to last year just shows how strong of a bond they developed, how big of a roller coaster they went through, like blowing a 3-1 lead to the Nuggets, Mitchell popping off, and still not enough for the Jazz to move on to the second round. And then now they get off into this 10-game win streak so far. I think it's been really great, and there's just been so many contributing players to that team, like Jordan Clarkson coming off the bench. I talked about him the other week when we were giving our mystery players, and look where he is now. I think he's averaging around 20 points per game. He's just being that offensive spark off the bench. And it's proving well for them. And Bojan Bogdanovic is still getting there. And Mike Conley. I want to talk about Mike Conley. He's shooting 42% from three. And I just saw a post on Facebook today, and it was talking about the All-Star game. And the only thing that went through my head, get this man to the All-Star game this season. Make him an All-Star. It's been so long. People have been underrating him his entire career. He is such a great point guard, a smart point guard. Has never gotten a technical foul ever, or had never been ejected from a game. I think that's such an underrated stat in all of the NBA. But yeah, I just love the guy. He's just such a backbone for this team, and you can just tell that this team really plays a lot of good team basketball. You don't need Donovan Mitchell to carry this team when you have guys like Joe Ingles, Bogdanovic, Conley, Gobert, O'Neal. Like all these guys are contributing, and they're just playing right team basketball. And so because of that, Quinn Snyder's got a really good case for Coach of the Year, early candidate for sure. So I'm excited for this team. This is not a fluke for them. So yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've loved this Jazz team for a long time. I always really liked Mitchell just because his game is so versatile in the way that he can score at three levels effectively at times. He's not always the greatest shooter, but the reason this team is legit this year, as you pointed to, is Mike Conley. Mike Conley, when they had Ricky Rubio 2 years ago, I pointed at this team. They had some discussions with Memphis at the trade deadline, and I thought if they had made that trade for Mike Conley, that would improve their team defensively, offensively, and it would give them that leader that they seem to lack. And then he came to Utah last year, and he really didn't play up to expectations. He had a hard time fitting in with that team where Donovan Mitchell had started to kind of merge into that point guard, shooting guard kind of player where he is a little bit more ball dominant. And now you finally get to see after a year of playing together what Mike Conley always should have been with his Jazz team is finally coming true, because he has been that leader. He's been so much of a stable player for this team. He gets the ball to Rudy Gobert. He gets the ball to Bojan. He helps Derek Favors get reacclimated to how the team works now. And they have been so great with him at the helm there. It's taken a lot of pressure off Mitchell. Clarkson's been great off the bench with that really good bench unit actually now in Clarkson, Ingles, and Derek Favors coming off with Niang, who's kind of an interesting player where he's more methodical, but he can be effective from three. He can get to the basket. And yeah, I love this team. I love how they're built. I didn't know if they would ever become a legit contender, but watching them beat down on the Mavs without Donovan Mitchell, it really gives that feeling that, okay, the Jazz are, if you look at the West right now, they are a top 3 team in the West, and they'll give a lot of trouble to playoff teams like they did last year with Denver for the first 5 games first 4 games of the series before that collapse. They should be a team who is in it for the finals this year, and hedge your bets to this Utah Jazz team, because they'll continue to be effective every night that they're on the floor right now.
Yeah. I have a bold prediction for this playoffs. I predict that Mike Conley will be this year's playoff Rondo. Like he has the build for it, and they're very similar in game in terms of they're just a veteran point guard who just knows the ins and outs of the game. And yeah, I think Conley has just been such a pivotal piece in carrying this team to where they are now. And when you mentioned the bench, like, yeah, they've been playing really well. I think the past year or 2 or even 3 years, I think they always planned to play Joe Ingles off the bench, because ever since they got Bogdanovic, but since Bogdanovic has been derailed by injuries the past 2 years, they had to start Ingles. And every time I watch that team start Ingles, I'm like, oh yeah, he's a good player, but like, what if they had Bogdanovic? What if they had him to start and instead just have Ingles off the bench and be that offensive spark? And so I don't think the Utah Jazz have ever had a long of a stretch as they had this year, where they're able to stay healthy, keep Bogdanovic in the starting lineup, and have Joe Ingles still come off the bench. I think that's been very helpful for them in terms of their depth, where Ingles and Yang provide a lot of 3-point shooting. So, and one more point about the Jazz win streak. Their past 10 wins haven't really been against solid teams. Like, I think I'm looking at their past wins against New Orleans, Atlanta, Cleveland, Detroit, Golden State, right? There are a lot of blowouts, but needless to say, that's just like a small wrinkle, but it doesn't take away the fact that they've been so well. So just something to note, but it's not deterring my thought that they're really good right now. So
yeah, Ingles continues to. I read this thing where I was just becoming a fan of this Utah team, and talked about these finger roll alley-oops that Joe Ingles always threw to Derek Favors. Yes. This was around the 2017 season. And when I was reading it, I knew a bit about Joe Ingles, but I was like, there's no way this guy's a playmaker. If you want to see the funniest playmaker in the league where guys just don't know how to defend him, go and watch Joe Ingles, because he continues to get to the paint, get buckets against much taller defenders, much more athletic guys. He continues to frustrate elite defenders like Paul George in the playoffs 2 years ago. And he's such a creative player, and Derek Favors understands how he plays, and he complements that really well. So with that bench unit back with Favors again this year, that's why you've seen them excel so much from that aspect.
Yeah, Joe Ingles is just such a fun player to watch, and his demeanor on the court just really throws people's games off. Like, I think he's what Patrick Beverley is wanting to be, where he's just that annoying guy, but he doesn't do the stuff that Beverley does, where he just flails and is just the most fragile player on the floor. But yeah, I am so excited for the Jazz to keep improving and to just continue to go on this really impressive 10-game win streak. So moving on, we're going to talk about the Cleveland Cavaliers. They beat the Brooklyn Nets 2 games in a row. Darius Garland is finally back from injury. And so with Cleveland's recent wins over Brooklyn's Big Three and a tough battle against the Lakers, how have the Cavs changed the perception of their franchise?
When I was listening to The Jump the other day, they were talking about, I believe it was The Jump. It could have been First Take, but they were talking about, Richard Jefferson was talking about how he's talked to a bunch of GMs around the league before, and they look at Colin Sexton and they just think he's a bench player. Like, they haven't heard about him since the draft. They think he's a bench player. And then he comes on the scene, ruins that Big Three's debut on national TV. And all of a sudden, everyone's like, okay, Cleveland's number 6 in the standings right now. They continue to put up good games, good defensive games. Their backcourt is young. They just cut Kevin Porter Jr., who I thought was a good prospect, but obviously had some issues with the rest of the team. But people have never taken this sex line backcourt seriously. And now you're starting to see Colin Sexton average 27 points per game. And Darius Garland has been effective in both his scoring and getting assists, getting the ball down low to Andre Drummond or JaVale McGee or Larry Nance Jr., whoever it is down there, or Jared Allen, their new addition. And this team, they have enough young players that you can convince yourself now that they have a future there. And now national media, when they're talking about this Cavs team, they're not talking about how LeBron has ruined their franchise or left them in this rebuilding purgatory that so many teams seem to be stuck in, like the Pistons. It's become a kind of a consensus nationally after these few games that, okay, this Cavs team is going to be here for a while. They're going to be a contender for the playoffs, and they could make a few moves and end up with a really good team in the next 3 years. So that has really shifted the narrative from post LeBron never going to be a contender or a playoff team again to, okay, maybe this team has something and they're going to continue to work this backcourt with Sexton kind of leading the team now and Jared Allen a nice young piece to add to from that Brooklyn trade.
Yeah, and it's just so poetic for them to see them beat the Brooklyn Nets, the team that gave them the 2018 first round pick in Colin Sexton, because it all dates back to that blockbuster trade with Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, where Brooklyn trades their 2018 first round pick to Boston, and then Boston gives it to Cleveland for the Kyrie Irving trade, and that pick ends up being Colin Sexton. And then you go out and you beat Brooklyn when they just acquired James Harden. Like, it's just so beautiful to watch, and I think that's why so many people in the entire media has just appreciated those 2 games that the Cavs just steamrolled the Brooklyn Nets. And so what are your thoughts on their big situation? Like, I think there's a lot of rumors of Andre Drummond gonna seek a buyout and go to the Nets or another team because they just have so many bigs. But there's also been this counter argument saying that they're not going to give away Drummond because they're pushing for the playoffs now. So what are your thoughts on just the situation and all their bigs, and what do you think they're going to do?
It's interesting. As the NBA has moved to this small ball, there's been this idea that you can play basketball without bigs. And you'll look at a team like Toronto right now. Their best big is Chris Boucher. And then they go and play Joel Embiid in Philly. And they get absolutely slaughtered because they don't have that big body inside. And you can see that with Brooklyn right now. When the Cavs played Brooklyn, they got whatever they wanted down there. And Andre Drummond is a player who 2 years ago, I think he was given away to the Cavs for next to nothing. The Pistons, sorry, that was last year. He was given away at the trade deadline for next to nothing. And the Pistons basically said, this guy cannot survive in the modern NBA. And then you look at teams right now, Toronto, Boston, Brooklyn, who's obviously trying to get him right now. There's such a big need for this rebounding type of center, an athletic shot blocking, big rebounding center, because so many teams have moved on from drafting those prospects and developing those prospects. And that's where I see Andre Drummond being a buyout candidate. Like, this man has value around the league. He draws a first round pick potentially for this Cleveland team, and maybe a couple other impact players to match a contract. And that's where you see a team like Cleveland. Yeah, they have this collection of bigs, but there's not enough bigs around the league right now. So maybe there's been a method to their madness of collecting all these bigs. And I think that Drummond will end up with Toronto, Boston, or Brooklyn. I don't know how they're going to work out a buyout with him. I don't see him staying in Cleveland just out of the fact that Jarrett Allen is really their future at the 5. But expect Drummond to draw some value. I don't believe in this buyout talk just because Cleveland and Andre Drummond seem to have a good relationship. So I would look for them to get some good draft picks, maybe a couple of young prospects for him. But I do expect him to be moved, unfortunately, for a Cleveland team where he's been really good so far.
Yeah, it's hard for me to decide where he goes, if he goes. And there is a strong case where he just sticks around for this season, and it's just one of those seasons where, okay, let's just make a push to the playoffs and just see how we do, and might as well just keep drumming because we're doing so well, and just have this deep front court of Drummond and Allen and Kevin Love even when he comes back. I could see them just making a push for the playoffs, which will actually even just boost the morale of the entire organization and just establish a culture of just winning basketball again. And so because of that, I think Drummond might just stay for now, but in terms of the off season for next year, yeah, for sure he's going to go because Jarrett Allen is your primary center for that team. So
yeah, this Cleveland team has just been kind of working itself into some deals and picking up some good pieces along the way, which I really like as a franchise who was kind of bereft of talent before. They've kind of gotten themselves into taking on some bad contracts for some good pieces and whatnot. So yeah, moving on from this Cavs team, Bradley Beal, he scored 47 the other night, and the Wizards have lost 10 straight games when he scored over 40. Will Beal finally be freed from this Washington team, or will he stick around the rest of the season?
He has to stick around. I mean, it's not the end of the world yet, and I think Washington Wizards fans may think so. Like, they may think that, it's over. We're 3-11. We're just so trash. Westbrook has been out with injury and all that, and everyone's been out with COVID. Like, it's over. But no, it's not over yet. I still believe in the Russell Westbrook and Bradley Beal tandem. I think it's not the problem of the roster. It's a problem of Scott Brooks. I think it's more of a coaching problem when you have such a good roster of players, and sure, you've been derailed by COVID protocols and injuries and all that, but I think you need to change the coaching scheme and just from top to bottom. I think that needs to go, and it's so unfortunate to see Bradley Beal just ball out and not win games, and I think it's a bit skewed in a way where they've been losing games because they don't have everyone back yet, and you just see them sign Jordan Bell and Alex Len. Like, come on, these guys are just so desperate, and sure, you can make a case from that they're doing their best to keep Beal here, and I don't know, and Beal said he's gonna stay, and he has got a massive contract, but you know, it really is only a matter of time to see it, and they're on a really short leash in terms of this team and how Beal's gonna feel in the next 1 or 2 weeks. But I still believe I think Rui Hachimura is coming back tonight. And you just got a boatload of players who are almost ready to come back. I still believe give them 1 or 2 weeks once everyone's back to see what they're really made of. But I still want to see Westbrook and Beal play together.
Yeah, when I look at this Washington team right now, I don't see a roster that's terrible. Like, Westbrook has led teams on his own to the playoffs in 2015 once Durant left. And you have some players there. Hachimura could be a good player. Bertans is a great shooter. And they just haven't really gotten a chance to play together yet. I mean, they had the first few games of this season, but Russell wasn't really acclimated. He wasn't playing his normal minutes every game. He was sitting back-to-backs. And I do want to see this Washington team play together for even a stretch of 10 games where we can just actually get the knowledge of what their team is. But I don't agree with you on the aspect of Bradley Beal won't be traded, but I think it's for a separate reason than people tend to believe, because Beal has been so good over the past 2 seasons. You kind of have to, as a contending team who maybe doesn't have that same talent level as a Lakers team or the Brooklyn Nets now with their big three. If you're Denver, you're sitting in that like 7-8 seed right now. Michael Porter becomes pretty expendable if you can get a guy like Bradley Beal, who is consistently a great scorer, consistently a great teammate, never says anything bad about his team, continues to play hard every night. I would look at a team like Denver or some other teams like maybe Toronto or some teams who have a roster where maybe another piece puts them in that top echelon of teams. And that's why I would think that maybe Beal gets traded. But I don't think that Beal is the kind of guy who forces himself out of a situation like we watched with Harden this past offseason, because one, it really hurts your teammates, and he's definitely a great teammate. I mean, I've watched plenty of stuff talking about how he's stayed committed to that franchise for so long. And also, it kind of taints your reputation around the league a bit. Like,
Yeah.
you look at James Harden right now, and sure, he's in a good position for himself to win, but teams are never going to look at James Harden the same way. He's never going to be that guy who you could build around. I mean, he's getting older, but even like a guy like Anthony Davis before, where you would have thought like, oh, we'd be lucky to have him on our team as a small market team. You're never really going to have that option again to sign him or put him as your cornerstone, because you're always worried in the back of your mind about, okay, maybe he's going to move on from our team, or maybe he's going to push out of a situation that he ends up not liking. And that's where, yes, these players get what they want in the short term, but they do suffer from it long term. And I don't think Beal's going to make that move, especially when he's committed himself to Washington for so long.
Yeah, and the case you can make to argue that Beal will go is that they really have no starting center anymore. I think the loss of Thomas Bryant for the rest of the season kind of makes you think that, oh, it's over. Maybe they're not going to make the playoffs at all, because you only have Robin Lopez as your only solid starter center, and you have guys like Jordan Bell and Alex Len who are not even like who are barely rotation pieces. And so, yeah, I don't know. It is unfortunate. I feel bad for Beal for sure. He's just going to be another All-Star this year, but not be able to help his team win games. So, yeah, I would give it a week or two to see how this team actually plays when they're at full strength. If even they'll be at full strength. If they can't even be at full strength, it's over. There's really no chance for them to make it into the playoffs with this deep conference in the East. So, moving on to another struggling team in the Western Conference, the New Orleans Pelicans. They are second last in the West. What is the problem in New Orleans? And will J.J. Redick and Lonzo Ball be traded?
Lonzo Ball. That is the answer to your question right now. Lonzo last year, he was really great in the later season. He was close to getting a triple-double most nights before the season shut down in March. And that's because he was a confident Lonzo Ball, chucking alley-oops to Zion Williamson with one hand right when he crosses half court, getting down the lane, dunking hard, and shooting his three really effectively actually late in last season. And even at the start of this season, he had been good for the first few games, and now his confidence has kind of fell off a cliff. And Lonzo Ball he can theoretically be the hub of your offense in that he makes good decisions, he gets up all the scores, he's enough of a threat as a scorer himself to keep the defense honest, and he plays good defense. But when Lonzo is not confident in his game, he turns it over. He doesn't attack the basket. Opponents continue to sag off of him when he's got the ball at the 3 line. And as soon as players are allowed to sag off of you as a point guard on New Orleans, that means less opportunity for Zion. The paint is Zion's territory. Like, period. The paint is the only place where Zion is ever going to score because his jump shot is really broken and he has no mid-range game and he just gets to the basket. So when you are a Pelicans team who has Zion as your centerpiece, every player on the floor has to be a threat, apart from Steven Adams, because he can set those elbow screens for Zion as he cuts down the lane. Or Steven Adams is a really smart player in that he picks his spots and he knows how to play with other players. So that has been all right so far. But yeah, it's really coming down to Lonzo hasn't been able to run the team for some reason that's unknown to me, but he's lost his confidence. Brandon Ingram has still been good, and he's been the all-star of that Pelicans team so far. But it's going to continue to be the same issues until Lonzo gets his confidence back or is traded away.
Yeah.
I do think that he will be traded, and I do think, I think maybe he'll be traded. JJ Redick's gone for sure, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. It's their shooting has been just horrible. I think they're 27th in 3-point percentage. JJ Redick, he's shooting 29% from 3. In the past 6 years before the season, he has been shooting over 40% from 3. Like, and when you see that stat, you're just thinking, like, what's wrong with this guy? But I think the real problem is that it's not really his shot, because he's been such a lethal 3-point shooter. Because when I watch him play, it's more of the shot opportunities that he gets, and as well as the lack of 3-point shooting the rest of the team has. And so because of that, when you're the only 3-point threat on the floor, of course you're going to be double teamed, you're going to be smothered, you're going to be face guarded. And so when I watched him play off the bench, he's been shooting so many contested shots, so many contested baseline mid-ranges where he's just off balance shooting off the catch. And sure, you can blame his shooting stroke, but I don't. It's more of just the opportunities and looks he gets because of the lack of a threat that other Pelicans players are. And when we talk about Lonzo, he's shooting 30% from 3, and people have been saying, yes, he's fixed his shooting form. It looks way more better. And I agree, but the stats don't show it. He's been shooting 30%. And so, and when you have, like you mentioned, Zion in the paint 24/7, along with Steven Adams, that's already 2 guys in the paint that are in there, and that attracts so many players there. And so when you leave open guys like Bledsoe and Ingram's a good shooter, but like when you leave guys like Bledsoe and Lonzo, and you're guarding and you're smothering Redick, I think teams are easy to jump out to their flaws and expose them really bad. And I think their defense has been really bad as well. I think when Steven Adams is off the floor, I think their defensive range just plummets like crazy. Jackson Hayes hasn't been good at all. He's too skinny. And even actually Nico Melli, if people have been saying this guy's been so bad this year, like every time he's on the floor, he looks completely lost. He can't even shoot the ball anymore. Yeah, it's just been a mess, but it's not like the Washington Wizards where they're just a total total trash. I think It's more of just getting used to the coaching of Stan Van Gundy. There's no way that you improve in a span of a year once Stan Van Gundy comes in to coach this team. You have to give this team time. And I thought coming into the season, like when we were doing our rankings, I realized like, oh my, I just left New Orleans out of the playoff spot. How could I do this? Their roster on paper looks so scary. But then now, like at this point, I realized like, oh, I put them out for a reason. Like this team is good on paper, but everyone's really young. And sure, the emergence of Brandon Ingram has been really a good story, but they're just not good enough in a loaded Western Conference.
Yeah, there are a few games this season where Nickeil Alexander-Walker started, and he looks to be a very effective point guard. He can score well. He shoots the three much better than Lonzo, and they should maybe think about moving in that direction with their point guard for the future, where because your team built around Brandon Ingram can score on his own, but Zion, he can't score on his own unless he's down low, right? Like he doesn't create offense apart from getting to the rim. And that's where having a primary scoring threat at the point guard position would be so useful for this team, because they are starting Eric Bledsoe, who, I mean, there's a reason Milwaukee got rid of him. Steven Adams, who he's a good piece to a team. I really loved what he did last year for OKC, where he basically set screens, got boards, and got putbacks, and that was his source of offense because that team had a lot of offense around him. And he is a good piece. He's very versatile to whatever lineup he's on, but you need to have another actual scorer in that starting lineup, because you're starting three guys who are non-scorers right now, and Lonzo, Bledsoe, and Steven Adams, and that doesn't work in the NBA. Like, you just can't manufacture offense through two guys the whole game. So that's where Nickeil Alexander-Walker, when he's been on, has been great for them, because defenses can even come up and double him at times. And yeah, like you said, like JJ Redick working into that lineup when Brandon Ingram's sitting or something, or Zion's sitting, you still have two scorers. You can double both of them, and the team can't do anything on offense.
Yeah.
And I would love to see JJ Redick in a Golden State Warriors uniform.
Yes.
Not a great defender, but he may bring back some of that Splash Brother vibe to that team. And I heard Kelly Oubre maybe would go there. I heard they were kind of talking about that as an option. I would like it for the Warriors. The Pelicans may get upside from him, although he hasn't been good at all this season. But I'm all on that JJ Redick to the Warriors bandwagon. So.
That would make it totally worse for the Pelicans, because Kelly Oubre is just shooting the 3-point ball so bad. I think he's 1 of 11 like thus far, like in the past couple games. But like that really hurts the Pelicans. But I don't know. Yeah, I agree with you in terms of seeing Redick succeed on a good team. And you know, I think there's one potential solution is you can stagger Steven Adams and Zion Williamson's minutes, because you can play Williamson at the 5, and yes, you have been starting both of them together, and I think they've been playing a lot together. But yeah, one solution is that you can stagger their minutes, have Zion at the 5, take Steven Adams out, put in another shooter or something. Like you can go with a lineup of Ingram, Williamson, Redick, Hart, and another shooter or something. That gives you more than 3 offensive scoring threats. So yeah, I don't know, but Stan Van Gundy's a good coach, so he probably knows better than both of us. So
it's a nice idea to stagger those minutes, but
yeah.
Then you're like, who do you put at the 4?
Yeah, exactly.
No one, because they don't have anyone to fill in that position on their roster.
Yeah,
right?
That's the problem that I had when I was just saying this. I'm like, wait, who's the 4th? Who's the guy playing the 4?
I think that's a problem with them right now, because they just don't have that guy. Like, they would love to do that. I'm sure Stan sees the issues with their lineup, and then it's like, oh, maybe I won't start Steven Adams tonight, and instead I will bring on Melly, Like, it just doesn't really work for how their roster is set up right now.
Yeah, and I always saw this team as a really deep team coming into the season, but it's a bit skewed where they're deep in only like two positions, front court and back court. Like they have like 3 point guards and they have like three bigs and one wing in Brandon Ingram. You don't have any other good wing you can play like rotational minutes other than Ingram, and so yeah, is this season a lost cause for them, Nate?
Yes, they're not making the playoffs. So if they are a playoffs or bust kind of team, which I think they should be with this roster, like sure you can chuck up another season to development, but Ingram's been in the league a surprisingly long time. Zion will maybe have a short career just given his build,
Yeah.
and I don't see a reason why there's any time to waste. So yeah, it has been a disappointment, and it's kind of a throwaway for them this year.
Yeah, they have to really work their magic in the offseason to really kind of revitalize the lineup of this team.
Yeah, okay. So moving on from New Orleans, we move to baseball, where the Blue Jays have added George Springer, Marcus Semien, and Steven Matz to their roster this offseason so far. And with these additions, are the young, hard-hitting Jays a challenge to the Yankees and the Rays in the AL East this season?
They are. I mean, they don't have as much firepower as the Yankees because no one really has a roster like the Yankees. It's just unbelievable. But yeah, they're a really solid team, and they've acquired really good players so far in terms of George Springer. He's just been a great player, and they do have a logjam at the leadoff spot, but I think Springer is probably a go-to guy for that, and so it's and you also have the development of Vlad Guerrero, where I think he's losing weight a lot, and if he's able to play third base consistently, then you have that DH spot become more flexible because they are really packed at the DH because you have, I think, Riley Telez, you have Vlad Guerrero, and you got like four starting caliber outfielders. So it is a very, very packed roster, but this Jays team is really coming together in terms of their batting, and I think this is probably going to be one of your best offenses ever since the 2015-2016 year when you had Bautista, Donaldson, and Encarnacion. I think having the Bo Bichette, Guerrero, and now Springer, I think you really have a really potent offense. So I'm excited for this team this year.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this team this year. The Blue Jays have been my team since like 2013 or 14 when I started watching baseball. And they, over the years, they've done quite a few things that I figured were kind of inconsequential, picking up some expiring contracts and whatnot. And then this offseason, they have tons of money to spend, and there's kind of a lot of great teams around baseball are kind of at the top of their salary. I mean, there's no salary cap, but most of them are like the Yankees had a big contract with Garrett Cole last year. And that just opened the windows for the Blue Jays, who have a lot of guys on their rookie deals and a lot of draw to their team finally because of this great young core that they've been able to bring on Springer and Semien, who were two guys who finished in the top 5 in MVP voting in the past 2 years. Like, when has that ever happened? And then you look at this lineup 1 through 7, like they have great players at almost every position on the diamond. They're catching. It's a work in progress. Maybe they add a different catcher during the season, but they have 7 solid position players. That DH spot, which is really flexible with what they want to do in that given game right now. And I am so excited to watch, hopefully, playoff baseball again this October. And it's always great to have your Canadian Blue Jays team play so well because everyone just gets into it. Everyone starts being invested. Playoff baseball, you may not like regular season baseball, but playoff baseball has a different vibe, and every at bat has so much tension. And I'm really excited for this team. I think they will give the Yankees for sure, and likely the Rays, a run for that AL East title, and they will be one of the best lineups in baseball with a pitching staff that is a little rough 4 and 5, but they add Steven Matz as that 3, and hopefully Nate Pearson turns into that 2, and they have their ace in Ryu. So I'm really excited for playoff baseball this year, and this team should be super fun to watch even for casual baseball fans.
Yeah, and for me, I think ever since the Jays kind of tore it down, I haven't really been invested in watching baseball, and I'm more of a Seattle Mariners fan, and their franchise is just a bust the past 10 years. And so ever since both of those teams, I think around 2015, 2016, they just kind of fallen off the rails after that year. I haven't watched that much baseball, and it hasn't really been entertaining for me to watch because both these teams were in their rebuild stages. But I think this year may finally be the year where we all can relive the 2016 and even 2015 Blue Jays, where you have just such good players in your batting order, where your offense is just a must-see TV every game. I think this is probably the year that the Jays will make it to the playoffs and go even probably kind of deep this season. But yeah, I think their only problem is just bolstering the bullpen. I think they got Kirby Yates, who's not too bad of a closer, but other than that, like, I'm looking at the relievers, like, who are these guys? But yeah, I think they're pretty deep in their batting order, but they just need like 1 or 2 more guys in their pitching staff, and they're good to go for this season.
Yeah, I'm excited for this season. Be good to be a Blue Jays fan again.
Oh yeah, for sure. Seattle Mariners though, whole different story. But,
hey, they're rebuilding. They're rebuilding.
Yeah. They've been rebuilding for the past 10 years. They have the longest playoff drought in all of sports, but it's so embarrassing. But I don't know. I don't even know if I'm gonna watch any Mariners games this year, but we'll see. But yeah, that does it for this week's edition of the pod. Thanks for listening again, and if you have any more questions, just let us know, and we'll be sure to answer them in the next episode. But yeah, thanks again. Until next time, we'll see you soon.